Welcome to the eternal consequences, folks. And no, that's not some philosophical statement about life choices. That's actually the name of the Galactic Council's maximum security prison ship, because apparently alien bureaucrats have about as much creativity as their human counterparts. Picture this: a massive floating fortress the size of Manhattan, bristling with enough weapons to vaporize a small moon, housing the galaxy's worst criminals in what they proudly call an escape-proof environment. The marketing brochure probably doesn't mention that it smells like a combination of burnt ozone, alien body odor, and industrial disinfectant. Trust me, I would know. My name is Frank Kowalski, and I'm 47 years old with the kind of face that screams middle management at a failing insurance company. I used to be a sanitation engineer back on Earth, which is a fancy way of saying I knew how to make toilets work and garbage disappear. Now I'm an intergalactic prison janitor, which is exactly what it sounds like, except the toilets are weirder and the garbage occasionally tries to eat you. Every morning at 0600 ship time, I roll my janitor card out of Storage Bay 7 and begin my rounds. Mop the floors in Cell Block Alpha, empty the trash receptacles in the guard stations, clean the viewports that look out into the endless void of space, scrub the holding cells where creatures from 17 different star systems contemplate their poor life choices. The beautiful thing about being a janitor is that you become invisible. Guards nod at you without really seeing you. Prisoners treat you like a piece of furniture. You're just part of the background like elevator music or the hum of life support systems. It's actually quite liberating, being nobody special. Take Warden Glorbex, for instance. He's a slug-like creature about the size of a small refrigerator, with skin that looks like wet concrete and a voice that sounds like someone gargling gravel. He slithers around the prison like he owns the place, which technically he does, leaving a trail of mucus that yours truly gets to clean up later. Human janitor, that's what he calls me. Not Frank, not even hey you, just human janitor, like I'm some kind of appliance. Human janitor, there is waste matter in Corridor 12. Human janitor, the detention cells require sanitization. Never a please, never a thank you. Just orders delivered with the casual dismissal reserved for the help. The prisoners aren't much better. I've been working this floating nightmare for 3 years now, and I could probably count on one hand the number of times any of them have actually looked me in the eye. To them, I'm just another part of the prison infrastructure, about as threatening as the air recycling system. Which, if I'm being honest, suits me just fine. You see, there's something oddly peaceful about being completely underestimated by everyone around you. It gives you time to think. Time to observe. It's time to notice things that people assume you're too simple to understand. Like how the guard rotation changes every 6 hours, but there's always a 3-minute gap during shift change where Section C is completely unwatched. Or how the environmental controls can be accessed through maintenance panels that nobody bothers to secure because, well, who's going to mess with life support except trained technicians? But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, life on the eternal consequences was predictable, routine, and mind-numbingly boring. Right up until the morning when everything went completely sideways, and suddenly being the invisible janitor became the most important job in the galaxy. It started like any other Tuesday, which in space is basically meaningless since there's no sun to mark the passage of time, but old habits die hard. I was in Section D, mopping the floors near the maximum security wing, when the lights flickered. Now, lights don't just flicker on a prison ship. These things are built with redundant power systems, backup generators, and enough fail-safes to make a nuclear power plant jealous. So when the lights flickered, followed by a sound like someone dropping a piano down a stairwell, I knew we were in for an interesting day. The alarm started wailing about 30 seconds later. Red lights bathed everything in that lovely "we're all about to die" ambiance while a computerized voice announced in 17 different languages that the ship was experiencing a Level 9 security breach. In case you're wondering, Levels 1 through 8 cover everything from minor contraband to full-scale riots. Level 9 is reserved for complete catastrophic system failure with imminent threat to all life aboard. So, Tuesday was looking up. The cause of our little emergency became clear pretty quickly when a 7-foot-tall reptilian nightmare came crashing through the reinforced doors of Cell Block Maximum like they were made of cardboard. Meet Kraxon the Destroyer, folks, the galaxy's most wanted war criminal, responsible for the extinction of 3 different species and the subjugation of 12 star systems. He looks exactly like what you'd get if a crocodile, a bodybuilder, and your worst nightmare had a baby together. Behind him came pouring out the greatest hits collection of galactic scumbags. There was Vex the Mind Ripper, a purple tentacled thing that could literally steal your thoughts. Gorlok One Eye, a cybernetically enhanced berserker who'd once eaten an entire peacekeeping battalion. And my personal favorite, Zelix the Magnificent, an energy being who looked like a disco ball having an epileptic seizure and had the personality to match. The prison guards, bless their hearts, tried to respond. They really did. Unfortunately, most of them were equipped to handle standard prisoner management, not a coordinated breakout led by someone who'd conquered solar systems for fun. Within minutes, half of them were unconscious, a quarter were dead, and the rest were running for their lives. The human personnel didn't fare much better. Commander Martinez, the military liaison who'd been stationed here to oversee human prisoner transfers, lasted about 15 seconds before Kraxon casually backhanded him through a bulkhead. The diplomatic attaché, a pompous little man named Pemberton, tried to negotiate and ended up as a light snack for something with way too many teeth. And through all of this chaos, this symphony of destruction and mayhem, I just kept mopping. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I'm aware of how absolutely insane it looks to continue your janitorial duties while the galaxy's worst criminals are painting the walls with guard blood. But here's the thing about being invisible. It works both ways. They couldn't see me because they'd trained themselves not to see me. Kraxon thundered past me, literally stepping over my mop bucket, without giving me a second glance. Vex flowed by like purple liquid death, its tentacles writhing with stolen memories, and it treated me like I was part of the scenery. Even when the security doors slammed shut, trapping me in the maximum security wing with enough concentrated evil to sterilize a small planet, they just ignored me. Human Maintenance Unit, Zelix announced in that pretentious voice that made me want to stuff him in a light socket. Continue your menial labors while your betters plan their glorious escape. So I did. I mopped around the scattered debris. I emptied the trash cans that hadn't been destroyed in the breakout. I even cleaned the blood off the walls, because somebody had to do it, and it certainly wasn't going to be the 7-foot murder lizard. But while I cleaned, I listened. And while I listened, I started to get annoyed. Not scared, mind you. Annoyed. Because these self-proclaimed criminal masterminds were making a complete mess of what should have been a perfectly simple prison break. And they were doing it with the kind of arrogant stupidity that makes you want to grab someone by the shoulders and explain exactly where they went wrong. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what I was about to do. You know what nobody tells you about being a janitor? You learn things. Not the fun things like quantum physics or alien poetry. No, you learn the really useful things, like which ventilation shaft connects to which section of the ship, or how the artificial gravity generators are calibrated, or exactly where every single security camera has a blind spot. 3 years of cleaning every square inch of this floating prison had given me what you might call an unconventional education. While Kraxon and his merry band of psychopaths were congratulating themselves on their brilliant escape plan, I was noticing some rather glaring flaws in their strategy. For instance, their plan to reach the shuttle bay through the main corridors was going to take them right through Section H, where the atmospheric processors were located. Now, most people don't know that atmospheric processors need regular maintenance, which means they're designed with emergency venting systems. Systems that could, if someone accidentally triggered them during routine maintenance, flood the entire section with knockout gas. So I accidentally triggered them. It was really quite simple. I was just doing my job, cleaning the maintenance panel, when my damp cloth happened to hit the emergency release. Pure coincidence that 3 of Kraxon's lieutenants were unconscious within minutes. The kind of happy accident that makes you believe in cosmic justice. What happened to Gorlok's strike team? Vex demanded, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. Atmospheric malfunction, Zelix replied. flickering with agitation. The ship's systems are failing across multiple sectors. I nodded sagely while wringing out my mop. Yeah, this old bucket's been having problems for months. You can't trust the environmental controls. They looked right through me, of course. I was just the janitor offering helpful maintenance tips. My next bit of routine cleaning involved the corridor leading to the armory. Now, industrial floor cleaner is wonderful stuff. It cuts through grime, eliminates stains, and when mixed with the right catalyst becomes incredibly slippery. The kind of slippery that sends armored space criminals sliding into bulkheads at high velocity. I was mopping away, humming an old Earth tune, when Brutus 9 came clanking down the hallway. He was a war robot, all chrome and attitude, built like a tank and twice as mean. His optical sensors were focused on the armory door, calculating breach patterns and defensive positions. He never saw the floor. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a 2-ton killing machine go sliding across freshly mopped floors like he's auditioning for a cartoon. Brutus 9 hit the far wall with a crash that probably registered on seismic sensors 3 sectors away. System error, he announced from his position upside down against the bulkhead. Traction malfunction detected. Sorry about that, I said, not looking up from my mopping. Wet floor signs are in storage. Budget cuts, you know. Even better was watching Zelix try to navigate the same corridor 10 minutes later. Energy beings, it turns out, still need to maintain some kind of contact with surfaces to move efficiently. When those surfaces are coated with industrial-grade floor wax, well, let's just say the Magnificent One spent several very undignified minutes bouncing off walls like a rubber ball. But my favorite little accident happened in the communications center. Kraxon had sent a team to disable the distress beacon, because apparently he'd never considered that maybe, just maybe, completely cutting off communications might be a bad idea when you're trying to coordinate a multi-level escape. I was just doing some routine maintenance on the power coupling when, whoops, my trusty screwdriver slipped. Suddenly, instead of disabling the beacon, they'd actually boosted its signal strength by about 300%. Every ship within a light-year radius was now receiving a lovely distress call, complete with detailed information about the prison break. The communication array is malfunctioning, one of Kraxon's technicians reported. All ship systems are degrading, Kraxon growled, his reptilian eyes narrowing with suspicion. This facility is more decrepit than intelligence suggested. I made a sympathetic noise while replacing a burnt-out light fixture. Yeah, maintenance budget's been cut to nothing. Half the systems are held together with duct tape and prayer. The beautiful thing about being underestimated is that people will believe absolutely anything you tell them, as long as it confirms their existing assumptions. These criminal masterminds were so convinced of their own superiority that they couldn't imagine a lowly janitor being anything more than a source of maintenance information. But with each accident, with each convenient system failure that just happened to occur during my routine cleaning, I was starting to feel that familiar itch. The same one I used to get back in my engineering days when I'd watch someone try to fix a machine without understanding how it actually worked. These amateurs were making a mess of my ship, and I was really starting to take that personally. Here's something that 3 years of invisible janitorial work teaches you. People are predictable, especially criminals. They think they're clever, but they all follow the same basic patterns. The big tough ones always go for the direct approach. The sneaky ones always overcomplicate things. And the smart ones always assume everyone else is stupider than they are. I'd been watching these particular specimens for long enough to know exactly how their minds worked. Kraxon was a brute force kind of guy, all intimidation and violence. Vex was paranoid and manipulative, constantly looking for psychological advantages. Zelix was a show-off who needed everyone to acknowledge his superiority. And Brutus 9, well, he was a robot, predictable as clockwork. So when I started my little campaign of sabotage, I made sure to customize the approach for each personality type. For Kraxon's assault teams, I arranged a series of structural failures that kept redirecting them away from their objectives. A collapsed ventilation grate here, a mysteriously locked door there, the occasional small explosion that I blamed on faulty wiring. Nothing too obvious, just enough to keep them running in circles while I worked to clear the obstructions. The ship's infrastructure is failing systematically, one of his lieutenants reported after their third detour. This human maintenance unit warned us about the poor condition of these systems, Kraxon replied, gesturing at me without actually looking in my direction. Continue the mission. We will adapt. For Vex, I played a more psychological game. See, mind readers are used to having perfect information, so they get really uncomfortable when things don't add up. I started leaving little inconsistencies around the ship. A guard uniform in the wrong storage locker. Security codes that didn't match the ones in the computer system. Small discrepancies that made the paranoid little monster question everything. Something is wrong, Vex announced during one of their planning sessions, its tentacles writhing with agitation. The information patterns do not align. There are gaps in the data. Perhaps, Zelix suggested with typical arrogance, your mental abilities are finally encountering a properly secured facility. Watching a telepathic nightmare have an existential crisis while I emptied nearby trash cans was probably the highlight of my week. But Brutus 9 was the real masterpiece. Military robots are programmed to identify threats and eliminate them with maximum efficiency. They're also programmed to categorize everything they encounter into neat little boxes: threat, non-threat, unknown. The problem with that kind of binary thinking is that it creates blind spots. I became his biggest blind spot. Every time something went wrong, I was there with my mop and bucket, looking completely harmless and slightly confused. When his weapons mysteriously jammed, I was just cleaning the nearby maintenance panel. When his navigation systems led him in circles, I was just mopping the same corridor for the third time because, well, it was really dirty. Anomalous system failures increasing, Brutus 9 reported to Kraxon. Probability of sabotage 73%. By whom? Kraxon demanded. Half our forces are incapacitated, and the remaining guards are scattered throughout the ship. Unknown. No hostile entities detected in immediate vicinity. I waved cheerfully at Brutus 9 from across the corridor, where I was scrubbing some particularly stubborn stains. His optical sensors focused on me for exactly 0.3 seconds before dismissing me as irrelevant. The best part was watching them start to turn on each other. When you're used to being the smartest, strongest, or most dangerous thing in the room, it's really unsettling when your plans keep falling apart for no apparent reason. Paranoia sets in. Blame gets assigned. Alliances start to crack. Your energy manipulation is interfering with the ship's systems. Kraxon accused Zelix after the third power grid failure. My abilities are perfectly controlled, Zelix protested. Perhaps your primitive assault tactics are triggering automated defenses. Or Vex suggested, its voice dripping with malice. One of us is not who they claim to be. While they argued, I continued my work. Industrial bleach, it turns out, is basically acid when you know how to concentrate it properly. Floor buffers make excellent improvised weapons when you remove the safety guards. And cleaning carts, well, they're just mobile weapons platforms when you think about it creatively. I was starting to enjoy myself. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was using my brain instead of just my hands. These self-proclaimed criminal masterminds had no idea they were being systematically dismantled by someone they considered barely sentient. But all good things must come to an end. And unfortunately for me, Kraxon the Destroyer hadn't conquered half the galaxy by being stupid. Brutal, yes. Psychotic, absolutely, but not stupid. Fine. And he was starting to notice patterns. The moment I knew my cover was blown came when I walked into Maintenance Bay 7 and found Kraxon waiting for me. Not pacing around like an angry predator, not roaring at his subordinates, no, just standing there next to my supply closet with the kind of stillness that makes your survival instincts start screaming. "Hello, Frank," he said. Now, the fact that he knew my name should have been my first clue that this conversation wasn't going to end with me quietly going back to mopping floors. In 3 years, exactly 0 prisoners had ever bothered to learn my name. But Kraxon had done his homework. Hi, I replied, because sometimes playing dumb is your best option. You guys finished with your, escape thing? Because I really need to get these floors clean before the next shift. His laugh sounded like grinding metal. Frank Kowalski, age 47, former Terran Engineering Corps, specializing in infrastructure and demolitions. Honorably discharged after the Proxima Station incident. Current occupation, sanitation engineer, Eternal Consequences Correctional Facility. Well, that was unfortunate. You've been busy, Frank. 17 of my operatives incapacitated. 6 critical systems sabotaged. My entire escape timeline disrupted by what appeared to be routine maintenance accidents. He stepped closer, and I could smell sulfur on his breath. Quite remarkable for a simple janitor. I shrugged, still holding my mop like it was the most important thing in the universe. Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I just clean things. If your guys keep slipping on wet floors, maybe they should watch where they're walking. The Proxima Station incident, Kraxon continued, ignoring my brilliant deflection. An entire hegemony invasion fleet, destroyed by a single human engineer who convinced them to dock with a space station he'd rigged to explode. Very creative. Very thorough. Very much not the work of someone who just cleans things. Okay, so he'd really done his homework. That was problematic. That was a long time ago, I said. Different life, different person. Perhaps. But skills like yours don't simply disappear, do they? You've been studying this ship for 3 years, learning every system, every weakness, every blind spot. Not for an escape, but for exactly this situation. He was right, of course. The janitor job had been perfect cover, but it had also been perfect preparation. You can't protect something unless you understand it completely, and understanding it completely means knowing exactly how to destroy it. So what happens now? I asked. You kill me? Congratulations, you've eliminated the guy who knows where the cleaning supplies are kept. Kraxon's reptilian features shifted into what might have been a smile. Oh, Frank, you still don't understand. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to offer you a job. That was not what I'd been expecting. See, I've spent the last hour reviewing security footage, analyzing system failures, mapping the patterns of sabotage. Do you know what I found most impressive? Not the technical skill, though that was considerable. Not the strategic thinking, though that was quite sophisticated. No. What impressed me most was the patience. He began circling me like a predator sizing up prey. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of being dismissed, ignored, treated like furniture. Most people would have snapped, would have done something dramatic to prove their worth. But you just waited, watched, learned. That kind of discipline is rare, Frank. That kind of long-term thinking is exactly what my organization needs. Thanks, but I'm pretty happy with my current career path. Are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like Earth hung you out to dry after Proxima Station. Classified your greatest achievement, buried you in a dead-end job, let everyone assume you were just another washed-up veteran. He wasn't wrong about that either. The official report had classified my actions at Proxima Station as routine engineering support. No medals, no recognition, no acknowledgement that I'd single-handedly prevented an invasion that would have cost millions of lives. They don't deserve your loyalty, Frank. But I do. Join me and you'll have resources, respect, and the opportunity to use your talents on a scale that matters. For a moment, just a moment, I actually considered it. Not because I wanted to become a galactic criminal, but because it would have been so much easier than what I was about to do instead. That's a very generous offer, I said, hefting my mop bucket. But I think I'll pass. The industrial bleach hit him right in the face. Now, Kraxon was tough. I'll give him that. Reptilian hide, enhanced durability, probably immune to most toxins. But concentrated hydrochloric acid will ruin anyone's day, regardless of species. While he was clawing at his eyes and roaring in pain, I grabbed my floor buffer and activated the emergency overcharge I'd installed during routine maintenance. Suddenly, my trusty cleaning device was spinning at about 3 times its normal speed and generating enough torque to shatter bone. Kraxon was fast, but pain and temporary blindness slow you down. The buffer caught him in the ribs, and the sound of cracking scales was quite satisfying. "You know what your problem is, Craxon?" I said, backing toward the waste disposal controls. "You think being dangerous means being loud and scary. But the most dangerous things are usually the ones you don't see coming." He lunged at me, claws extended, murder in his good eye. I ducked, hit the emergency flush button, and watched as the waste disposal system activated with a roar that shook the entire deck. The thing about waste disposal on a prison ship is that it needs to handle some pretty nasty stuff. Biological waste from 17 different species, chemical byproducts from the life support systems, and the occasional contraband that needs to disappear without a trace. The suction is powerful enough to pull objects through reinforced piping at several hundred kilometers per hour. It's also powerful enough to pull a 7-foot reptilian war criminal into the recycling system, no matter how hard he tries to brace himself against the intake. "Frank!" Craxon screamed as the system dragged him toward the disposal chute. "You don't understand what you're doing. There are forces at work here bigger than this ship, bigger than the Galactic Council. You're making yourself a target." "Yeah, well," I replied, watching him disappear into the waste management system. "Wouldn't be the first time." The silence that followed was quite peaceful. Almost made me forget that I still had about 30 other escaped criminals to deal with. The beautiful thing about taking out the leader is that it tends to demoralize the followers. Within an hour of Craxon's unfortunate encounter with the waste disposal system, the remaining escaped prisoners were either unconscious, captured, or had surrendered voluntarily. Vex, it turned out, had a complete psychological breakdown when I started feeding false memories into the ship's computer system, making the paranoid little monster think that everyone, including its own allies, was plotting against it. Celix tried to make a dramatic final stand in the shuttle bay, which ended abruptly when I overloaded the lighting system and gave the disco ball a taste of what a real light show looked like. Brutus 9 was actually the easiest to handle, but once I figured out that his combat programming had a priority conflict when faced with someone performing essential maintenance duties during a crisis. By the time the security reinforcements arrived, the eternal consequences was secure, all prisoners were accounted for, and I was back to mopping floors like nothing had happened. Warden Glorbex, of course, tried to take credit for the whole thing. "The containment breach was handled efficiently due to my superior crisis management protocols," he announced to the emergency response team, but his slug-like body quivering with self-importance. "My strategic coordination of available resources resulted in minimal casualties and swift restoration of order." The response team leader, a no-nonsense military type named Colonel Harrison, looked around at the unconscious criminals, the damaged systems, and the general chaos that comes with a prison break. "Impressive work, Warden. How exactly did you manage to neutralize subjects like Craxon the Destroyer with such minimal security personnel?" Well, the specific tactical details are classified, you understand. Proprietary containment procedures developed through years of experience managing high-risk subjects." I continued mopping nearby, invisible as always, while Glorbex spun his tale of heroic leadership and brilliant strategy. It was actually quite entertaining, listening to him explain how he'd single-handedly outwitted the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. At least until Colonel Harrison pulled out his tablet and started reviewing the security footage. "That's odd," he said after a few minutes of silent viewing. "According to these recordings, it appears that most of the containment actions were actually performed by—" He looked up from the screen and pointed directly at me. "The janitor." Glorbex's eye stalk swiveled toward me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "The human janitor? Impossible. That creature barely possesses the intelligence necessary to operate cleaning equipment." Colonel Harrison continued scrolling through the footage. "While this creature appears to have neutralized 17 escaped prisoners, sabotaged multiple breakout attempts, and ultimately eliminated the primary threat using waste disposal systems. Quite remarkable for someone who allegedly lacks basic intelligence." The next few hours were a whirlwind of debriefings, interviews, and bureaucratic confusion. Apparently, the Galactic Council wasn't quite sure how to process the fact that their maximum security prison had been saved by the maintenance staff. They offered me promotions, of course. Chief of Security, Prison Administrator, even a position with the Council's Special Operations Division. Each offer came with impressive titles, substantial pay increases, and the kind of recognition that most people spend their careers pursuing. "Thank you, but no," I said to each offer. "I'm quite happy with my current position." "But surely," the council representative insisted, "someone with your skills deserves better than janitorial work?" I looked around at my freshly mopped floors, my properly maintained equipment, my quiet, predictable routine. "With respect, sir, I don't think you understand what janitorial work actually involves." So I went back to my mop and bucket, back to my invisible rounds through the corridors of the eternal consequences, back to being furniture that the guards and prisoners looked through rather than at. Except now they looked at me differently. The guards nodded with something that might have been respect. The prisoners kept their distance with something that was definitely fear. Even Warden Glorbeck started saying please and thank you when assigning cleaning duties. But the best part, the part that made all of this worthwhile, came 3 weeks later when I received a message on my personal communicator. An encrypted transmission that bypassed all of the ship's monitoring systems. "Excellent work, Agent Kowalski," the message read. "Target neutralized, intelligence gathered, cover maintained. Your next assignment details are attached. Continue current operational parameters until further notice." I deleted the message, pocketed the communicator, and went back to mopping the floor in Cell Block Alpha. Just another day in the life of Frank Kowalski, 47-year-old former Earth sanitation engineer, current intergalactic prison janitor, and deep cover intelligence operative for the Terran Special Activities Division. The funny thing about being invisible is that nobody ever suspects you of being exactly where you need to be. And in a galaxy full of criminal masterminds, corrupt officials, and various threats to human security, there's always another mess that needs cleaning up. I whistled cheerfully as I worked, already planning my approach for the next assignment. After all, somebody has to keep things tidy. And I've always taken pride in my work, even if nobody ever notices who's really doing it.